I'm watching on 3 screens.
Bam! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Publicly Buzzed live on a Friday night. Welcome to Feral Friday. We have a very special, awesome show for you guys here tonight. I'm super excited about it. And yeah, I'm going to bring them on right now. Boom. What is up, everybody?
Hello, hello.
Hey.
We have a jam-packed house here tonight. Bob Motta and Sleuthie Goosie have come into the house tonight for Feral Friday.
Oh, yeah. See that dance move I got going? Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Hell yeah.
Bob's already partying.
Thanks, Luke.
It don't take long.
Yeah, I should have eaten an edible like a half an hour. Then I'd be primed.
Yeah, anybody that doesn't drink, yeah, whatever vice floats your boat.
Shit's legal in Illinois.
That's the way to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, but
same as booze in my world. I'm like, I don't even like let my I tell everybody in my family, I'm like, look, like I'm not gonna hide the weed the same way that you can have a bottle of booze out. I mean, it's the same shit. Like it is now legally.
It is now.
Like, you can't get over like you know. I don't allow the old hysteria of marijuana and the prohibition of it for all those years like affect what it should be now. It should be treated exactly like booze. Period.
100%.
Like I go to parties now. And people will have bowls of edibles out like they do a fucking bar, which is exactly how it should be. So I know there's one dude in our audience that supports everything I'm saying right now.
Oh, dude.
Jay.
Jay's in the Discord, in the Feral Friday Discord, yeah, he was cracking me up, dude. He had a really funny bong gif in there. But yeah, the 100%. Real quick in the chat, I see everybody hanging out. Thank you all for being here. I'm just going to take care of this real quick. I've seen it happening. Before we were actually going on live, some members came through. Thank you all so much. Give them the beers in chat, everybody. I'm trying to scroll back up. I might have lost some. I also see Holly Berry came through gifting memberships. Holy shit. Thank you all so much. She's got her very own specific soundbite. And I'm finding it here. Yeah, there she is. Bam. Tia M. Mags G. Tracy Fun. Anna. Carly. All of you, welcome to being Publicly Buzzed members. Appreciate the hell out of it. And again, we are on an extremely dank episode here tonight, and we're going to be getting to the Idaho 4 stuff, the crazy fucking world of Idaho 4. That is basically torturing everyone. Yeah, we've got a couple of different things to actually go over. Hold on real quick. I do want to put this out into the actual, and anybody else that wants anything plugged, but I want to put this out here for sure, for Defense Dairies, for Bob right here. This is his Linktree. And also, if you're not listening to the podcast of Bob, make sure you're doing that as well. And Jay coming through also membership, gifting out memberships. Lori, welcome as well. Love it. Look at that. The beer's already coming out in the chat there. Hell yeah.
I mean, shit's flowing.
Like to see it happening quick, guys.
It's happening.
Where's the fucking bong emoji? See, that's what I'm talking about. Why isn't there a bong emoji?
There was.
Why isn't there a joint emoji?
I do have a joint emoji.
There is a joint. There is a joint.
And I had a bong also, but the bong actually got taken off by YouTube. Isn't that retarded? You can have a joint, but you can't have a bong on there.
That's what, dude. It's fucking ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It doesn't even make any sense. But yeah, and it worked for a long period of time. But they all of a sudden randomly decided to take my bong away from me.
I see like a new teacup. Where did that come from? Is that a teacup?
And wait, this even gets stupider. I can have a joint on there, but I can't have a blunt on there. I tried to do a blunt emoji.
Seems racist.
Like,
actually, seems fucking totally
I 100% agree with that. Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, I mean,
but in the meantime, yeah, pass out the joints all day.
I see it right, and that shit racist.
They're confusing the joint with a cigarette, I guess. I don't know, but it's clearly a fucking joint.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a spliff.
Right there, look at that thing. Bam.
Oh,
that's a cigarette. Yeah.
Oh, is it a cigarette? So there's no pot-related anything that they're allowed?
No, there you go. That's a joint, though. Yeah, we get the J's going. It's confusing. Let me see here. But yeah, I have a lot of different stuff. Not a lot of stuff, just some random stuff. I know Dan wanted to go over some of the Touch DNA stuff, and we've got a couple of different things from the actual, from like the motions and stuff happening. What was the first thing you want to touch on here, Dan? The Lucas Anderson stuff. I got a really cool site. Actually, hold on. This was cool. I think Sleuthie saw this. Hold on. Did you look through this one, Sleuthie, right here?
Which one's this one? Is this the one?
Yeah, the DNA transfer to be placed. It was almost like it was like a test that was happening here.
where they touch the knife handle and then they see like whose profiles on it.
Yeah, yeah. DNA transfer to place, stored, and handle drug packaging and knives and housing. It's just kind of
they did multiple experiments. So they did it where there was touch DNA. They did transfer DNA. So touch DNA is just when you touch something, right? So if I touch my computer here, it now has my touch DNA on it. Transfer is where, say, I take this shirt off and I throw it on the fucking bed and somebody murders somebody and they leave the knife near my shirt, and then my DNA transfers from my shirt onto the knife. That's transfer DNA. So they're different. Like touch is where you actually, do it. And then, obviously biological is where you get it straight from the source,
What's
I've
trippy?
seen articles where they use them synonymously, touch and transfer.
They do.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it has something to do with the level of how much of the profile is there, like the kind of like trace.
Yep.
Yeah,
I've seen that used the same way. Yep.
Like our DNA expert, like when he was breaking shit down for me, that's like Sleuthie nailed it on the head. It's basically if it's kind of a minuscule amount, they don't really know if it was touch or transfer. Like
Right.
Either way, technically it's the same thing, but touch is where somebody physically touches it, whereas transfer, you could be transferring DNA from like an article of clothing where you're clearly not touching the item, and you can still transfer DNA. So
Yep.
that's why you have to worry about it.
Honestly,
DNA
reading through this stuff has been trippy as shit. Like,
DNA transfer's super easy, man. I mean, we're flaking off fucking hundreds of thousands of particles of fucking dead skin per day.
yeah, this article right here actually kind of shows. This was one about the dude that Dan was mentioning, but hold on, let me just make it a little bit smaller. But they did an experiment.
Okay.
Yeah, where they like had experiments for the instance. Volunteers sat at a table and shared a jug of juice. After 20 minutes of chatting and sipping, swabs were deployed on their hands, the chairs, the table, the jug, and the juice glasses, then tested for generic material. The jug was touched by each of the participants at least once, and each of their DNA was found on the handle in almost every case. Although the volunteers never touched each other, 1/3 wound up with another's DNA on their palm. 1/3 of the glasses bore DNA of volunteers who did not touch nor drink them. Then there was the foreign DNA profiles that didn't match any of the juice drinkers. It turned up on about half of the chairs and glasses and all over the participants' hands on the table. The only explanation to participants
for DNA, like if Dan had a glass and he had been drinking it, and then I picked it up and I had fucking Dan's DNA on my hand, that's transfer. That's not touch. Dan didn't touch me.
right.
Yeah.
Dan grabbed my fucking arm. That's touch DNA. You know what I mean? There's a difference, but
that's what I was saying. Like they use them.
I mean, at least people that don't like have an understanding of it use it interchangeably. Yeah, they're different things. I mean, they just are.
If you start throwing yourself into this whole conversation and you will like never touch anything ever, like the amount of other people's, like when he brought up the skin cells, it made me physically ill, because like the amount of other people's DNA that surrounds you at any point in time is like way more than you think. Like
it's trippy. Yeah.
Yeah. When we get into the Lucas Anderson case, I mean, that case should absolutely terrify anyone. It's unbelievable what happened.
And this is the article that's actually from, when I scroll back up here. And I hadn't really read deep into that, but it is pretty interesting. Yeah. And dude, this guy's an idiot. Hold on. When the DNA results came back, even Lucas Anderson thought he might have committed the murder. He said, "I drink a lot." He remembers telling public defender Kelly
It's completely browned out.
Yeah, he really was. He
must have been pretty fucked up, buddy. I had a couple of drinks. Maybe I murdered this entire family. I don't know.
Exactly.
As they sat in plain view in this jail, sometimes he blacked out. So it was possible he did something he didn't remember. And then he says, "Maybe I did do it." So out the gate.
Well, Bob, don't they do that? Like, don't they like? Your DNA is here. I mean, how do you explain your DNA? And it's almost like, well, shit, I don't know. Like, I had to have been there. If you're telling me my DNA is there, isn't that like kind of what happens?
Yes, it's absolutely what happens. Like law enforcement treats it more than the tool that it is. I mean, it's a tool for certain. I mean, it should never be the end all be all in any case, because there's always explanations as to why somebody's DNA can show up in a place where it otherwise shouldn't be. So I mean, you got to like. That's why they have fucking trials. You know what I mean?
100%.
That's why they have trials. That's why trials exist. So that's why I tell everybody to shut the fuck up with coming up with your final opinion before the shit's been vetted at trial. That's the whole purpose of a trial. It's why they exist. It's why the framers of the Constitution had the foresight to say, hey, you know what? Everyone's presumed innocent, and everybody in this country is going to get a trial. And that is going to allow for the evidence to be vetted by both sides. The state wants to produce it. The defense then gets to vet it with their own experts and challenge it. And then whatever the jury decides, that's what they decide based on the evidence they heard, not on speculation, not on bullshit, because that's the whole thing. That's my whole thing on, on the socials, man. I just I have a very low tolerance for fucking people that puke their opinions up, which are just that as fact. Like I have no tolerance.
Get
for
you down the old coffin daffer
that.
road real quick.
That's also why they say don't talk to police, right? Because the police will use even the most random circumstantial evidence to try to back you into a corner and make you feel.
Defense attorneys tell you, like I told you, Dan, my one rule: shut the fuck up. You don't say anything to the police, especially if you're innocent. Like the people that are innocent are like, what? If the cops were talking to you to begin with, they don't think you're innocent. That's what needs to run through your mind. If they brought you in because they need to speak to you, they think that you are somehow involved. Whether or not you did it, so you just shut the fuck up and you call a lawyer. That doesn't make you guilty. It makes you smart. That's it.
Yeah. I heard a guy explain it, and he explained it really well. And I was like, for someone that wouldn't really understand it, he basically was saying, like, the police, exactly what you just said, is they're not talking to you because they think that you might be helpful per se. They're talking to you because they're suspicious of you, and they want to clear that up. And one of the things in particular,
they want to clear it up.
Clear it.
We want to help you out.
Find more. Right. And he said, he was like, there's a reason why they say to you that everything you say can and will be used against you. None of it will be used to help you. Nothing you say that's helpful to your case will be mentioned at all. All of it that is going to be able to be sounding bad to whatever situation you're in, that's the part that they're going to use against you. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. And but this case we're getting ready to read, though, like, this is not an explanation that I think that like anybody would see coming. Even this own man like didn't expect that this was going to end the way that it was. I mean, you just said it. He said, maybe I did do it. I don't know how my DNA got there. And when you find out how it got there, it's so bizarre. Thank God they found out. Yeah.
Go down through here just a little bit further. Before he was charged with murder, Anderson was a 26-year-old homeless alcoholic with a long rap sheet. The murder victim, Ravish Kumar, I'm probably butchering that, was a 66-year-old investor who lived in Monte Sereno, a Silicon Valley enclave 10 miles. Around midnight on November 29, 2012, a group of men had broken into Kumara's 7,000 square foot mansion. They found him watching CNN in the living room and tied him, blindfolded him, and gagged him with a mustache printed duct tape. They found his companion, his wife, asleep in an upstairs bedroom, hit her on the mouth and tied her up next to him. Then they plundered the house for cash and jewelry. So what happens here basically is, once they put this duct tape on this man's face, he ends up smothering and suffocating to death and actually ends up dying. And then the gentleman that we're talking about out the gate here, the touch DNA guy, I keep forgetting his name, Lucas Anderson, they end up finding this guy's touch DNA on this dude that died under his fingernails.
Which is damning. The fact that it was under his fingernails is like one of the worst things it could be.
He just gave that guy a back scratch before he died.
Right, exactly.
I mean, there's excuse, like there's always some kind of rationale behind it. It doesn't always have to be murder.
Exactly. Like that's so crazy. But yeah, after the men left, Harinder, that was the wife, still blindfolded, felt her way to the kitchen phone and called 911. When police were out, of course, they found that he was dead, unfortunately. 3.5 weeks later, the police arrested Anderson. His DNA had been found on Ravish's fingernails. They believed the men struggled as Anderson tied up his victim. They charged him with murder. Kulik was appointed to his case. As they looked at the DNA results, Anderson tried to make sense of the crime he had no memory of committing. Which that was what would be absolutely terrifying, right? You're being brought in, you're being questioned, and they have your DNA at this scene. Not only that, it's under this dude's fingernails, and then you're dumb enough to be like, man, I love drinking, I love getting fucked up. Who knows? Like, that's crazy.
Yep.
No, I don't. Hold on, wrong angle. No, I don't do those things, he recalls, but maybe I did. That's the craziest part when I was actually reading this. I was like, oh my God, this guy.
But that's honesty.
He seems like an honest guy.
I'm reading my phone. I'm reading your chats. I'm not closing my eyes. People are like, oh, Bob's sleeping during while Dan's talking. I'm not sleeping. I'm just looking down at my phone because we have to have multiple devices.
Yeah,
we do. We have multiple devices. I got my iPad with all the good shit that Sleuthie sends me, and then I've got my phone for the chat, and then I've got y'all right here on the Mac. So multi-devices. It's exciting.
Yeah,
but I'm not sleeping.
See, real quick though, while I'm looking at it and before it disappears, Creed624 with the $9.99 super chat. Happy Friday. Let the feral fun begin. Thank you very much, Creed. Appreciate the hell out of that. I will give you one of these bad boys. And one of those. Thank you so much, Creed. Seriously. Absolutely appreciated.
Y'all know the shaming of Jay, like up the cash money shit, man. When he went to Woo, man, he's got the cream on there for whenever he gets. That's a high awesome bar, gentlemen.
It is, man. Jay kills it. Yeah, Jay's in the chat here too. What's up, Jay?
I hope my people are here. I can't see because I took my contacts out, so I can't read any of the chats.
It's awesome. We got a house in here tonight. Yeah, if you're just randomly hanging out, also please hit that like. Help us out, guys. Get us in the old YouTube algorithms there.
Fuck off, Jay.
Oh.
He's not sleeping. The weed is just that good.
So wait, so say how his DNA got under the fingernails.
Wait, hold on. Let me get back up here. Lost my spot. What happened, although months would pass before anyone figured it out, was that Lucas Anderson's DNA had found its way onto the fingernails of a dead man he had never met. Back in the 1980s, when DNA forensics analysis was still in its infancy, crime labs needed a speck of bodily fluid, usually blood, semen, or spit, to generate a genetic profile. That changed in 1997 when Australian forensic scientist Roland van Oorschot stunned the criminal justice world with a paragraph paper titled DNA Fingerprints from Fingerprints. It revealed that DNA could be detected not just from bodily fluids, but from traces left by a touch. Investigators also across the globe began scouring crime scenes for anything, a doorknob, a countertop, a knife handle that a perpetrator may have tainted with incriminating touch DNA.
Weren't they already looking at that for fingerprints, though? These genius cops? Weren't they already looking at all those things for fingerprints?
Right, yeah, you would think so.
That's the whole, they already did that. And they have that, and you don't know better than them, but obviously somebody didn't.
Say, all those fingerprints you guys took, those probably have DNA on it. Just a tip.
Let's get down through here a little bit more. In a sense, this isn't surprising. We leave a trail of ourselves everywhere we go. An average person may shed upward of 50 million skin cells a day. Holy shit.
I was so way gross, under. Man. What did I say? 100 million?
It's so fucking gross.
It's fucking gross. It's like the zombie apocalypse just floating around. We're inhaling it.
Oh, dude, don't say that.
It's in our hair. We're eating it in our soup.
The inhaling part just fucked me up. Lucy, an average author of Inside the Cell, a book about forensic DNA, has calculated that in 2 minutes the average person sheds enough skin cells to cover a football field. In 2 minutes?
Jesus Christ.
What the fuck? We also spew saliva, which is packed with DNA. Spewing. We can stand still and talk for 30 seconds. Our DNA will be found more than a yard away. Woo, jeez.
Especially me, I spit a lot when I talk.
Oh, man. God, not even mentioning.
My DNA's everywhere.
I hope my hands block some.
A forceful sneeze.
Gross.
Dear God.
It's really not hard to see how people become like germaphobes and stuff like that.
Oh, man, for sure.
This article's taken me there, I think. To find out. Oh, shit.
You over?
Clicked the wrong thing. Hold on.
No more statistics.
Lost my place.
I mean,
an average.
Yeah, that was a shock.
A football field. That's where you were at.
To find out the prevalence of DNA in the world, a group of Dutch researchers tested 105 public items, escalator rails, public toilet door handles, Shopping basket handles, coins, 91% bore human DNA, sometimes from half a dozen people, even items intimate to us. The armpits of our shirts
Shut the fuck up.
compare to other people's DNA they found.
Oh my god. What?
Yeah, DNA has serious implications for forensic investigators. After all, if traces of our DNA can make their way to a crime scene we never visited, are we all possible suspects? Like, when you really do get into the touch DNA side of this, or the transfer DNA, whatever you want to say, I guess it's the touch in this case with the Brian Kohberger stuff, man, it does make you start asking a lot more questions. Because if that's the strongest thing they have, man, that's pretty fucking crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean it's certainly going to be tested. You know what I mean? When I say tested, I mean challenged at court. I mean, if you don't think Ann Taylor is fucking like going full blown attacking that shit, I mean, you're nuts. I mean, like that was always going to be the thing. I mean, like, that's why when the PCA on that thing dropped, I'm like, it leans towards guilt, but that doesn't mean shit. You know, like that, like it leans towards guilt because that's what the state's theory of the case is, and that's all it is. It's like every time I'm on with you guys, I tell you every case is merely two stories: the state story and the defense's story. And then what they're using is the evidence that's there in order to fill in the gaps or put the pieces of the puzzle together. And then it's for the jury to decide whether or not the person did it. You know, because the one thing that we all know definitively, all of us, is that none of us were fucking there at any of these crimes. And you know what else? The cops weren't there, the state wasn't there, and I wasn't there. None of us were there. The perpetrator and the victims. And the victims, if it's a murder, are clearly not with us anymore. So there's one person on earth that knows what actually happened. The rest of it is all of us just guessing. You know, so, and that's like, it's, you know, we do, that's why we have to wait for trial. Like, they're like, to speculate about anything now is just that. I mean, that's not to say that we can't dive in and try to figure shit out, because we can, you know, but we also have to realize that we don't know anything about what they've recovered post arrest. They may have recovered nothing. They may have recovered nothing. People are like, oh, they got all that shit from his apartment. They didn't get anything. They got items that they're going to test to see if there's the girl's or Ethan's DNA on it. That's what they got. Everything from his car, his apartment, the folks, all that shit. They're testing to see if they can find traces of the victims in any of those three spots. And we have no idea whether they have or they haven't. From what it sounds like from Ann Taylor in her the most recent filing that Sleuthie sent me, she's saying they don't have shit. So, you know, I mean, could she be grandstanding? Of course. You know, I mean, there's obviously, you know, they're not sealing these documents. So we're getting a peek behind the curtain to see kind of what's going on. And, you know, and like, for me, it's not unusual because I've been trying cases for 20 years. This is par for the course. Like, when I see these, like what are basically boilerplate motions coming from the state, you know, where you know, you could tell they've used that same motion 50 times in multiple cases. They just plug and play in terms of names and facts, you know, like, whereas Ann Taylor's are more specific to the facts of the case. You know what I mean? So, but it does give you insight into what's going on. That's why I always say, man, like, in any trial, the real war is not the trial itself. It's the pretrial motions that take place. That is where the battle is. That is what should be broadcast on court TV. I mean, we all like to watch the trials. If you enjoy watching that, you'd love watching a motion to suppress, because that's where the fucking battle is. Because what the trial is the culmination of all the motion work having been done, the judge ruling on what is admissible and what's not admissible, and that's what you're getting is the end result of that. Like, if you listen to my Gacy or my Garcia season, which is season 2, there's shit that I'm going to be talking about in my podcast, which was incredibly strong evidence that we weren't allowed to bring into court, that I'm putting on my podcast because it wasn't admissible in court, but it sure the hell is admissible in my podcast. And it was things that, like, for whatever reason, if a judge makes a ruling that I think is bullshit, I can't do anything about it at trial. That's got to wait till appeal. You know, we raise the issue at trial. That's, like I always say, it's like when you hear lawyers objecting at trial, the reason that they do that is to perfect an issue for appeal. Like, if you like, that's why they say if you fall asleep in court, if you're a lawyer, the first thing you do when you wake up is you object. Like, you just assume, you know, like, you have to do it, because if you don't object at trial to certain issues, that it's waived. So, you know, when it irritates people when people object and they have the sidebars, there's a reason for it. I mean, it matters, and it's all relating to down the road if there's a conviction, and then when there's going to an appeal is coming down the road. So that's what all that shit that you see when you're watching trials, and it irritates you, and like, why does this guy keep fucking objecting every 5 minutes and stopping the flow? And why are they sidebarring all the time? It's like, that's all the shit that you have to do in order to perfect the record for appeals. So
having YNW Melly flashbacks right now from sidebars.
That actually makes way more sense. I get, so it's not even necessarily you're objecting to something happening right then and there, more so in the future.
Well, that's exactly what it's for. I mean, like, obviously, like, if they make a leading objection, that's not going to be something that is going to overturn a case on appeal. Like if the state is on redirect, is leading the witness where they're, and like, you can always tell when somebody's leading when they ask a yes or no question. Like direct examination, when I'm directing somebody, it allows them the space to give a narrative answer back to me. When I'm cross-examining somebody, I am controlling the narrative of the testimony. I don't want my witness going off Murdoch style talking for a fucking half an hour. Like, I know our boy got him convicted and everything, but I had a lot of critiques of the way Creighton Waters handled that particular. I mean, fortunately, he had a defendant that fucking buried himself, because the way that he handled that cross-examination, letting Murdoch go on for, an hour. So the guy was talking forever,
dude.
The whole day.
For all day. And when I'm on a cross, I am controlling the witness, and I am asking yes or no questions. And if they go too far afield, I'm asking, I'm making a request of the judge to have the witness to stop talking. It was a yes or, it's like, I can't address the witness in that way in terms of outside the bounds of a question. So I'll ask the judge, I'll say, Your Honor, it's non-responsive. I asked a yes or no question. Can you just please advise the witness to answer my question? It's yes or no. I don't need to hear your bullshit.
Right.
It's a yes. You know what I mean? So you control. So anytime you hear those types of, on a direct where somebody says objection leading, that they've asked like a yes or no type question as opposed to like a narrative type. So like those types of objections don't really matter as much. But like when you get into objections, like where they've said something that they believe maybe have been ruled on like earlier in a motion in limine. Like, so like if like you can't bring up the word molestation, like that came up in this trial I was watching on Law and Crime and like talking on, and it's with the Black Swan ballerina case where they're doing the stand your ground hearing, and like they had something about. No, I take it back. That's a completely different trial. It was the trial with I can't even fucking remember. I worked.
I'm like, yeah, I believe you. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, this one was like, and they asked for a mistrial in the very first 5 minutes of the opening statement because the state had brought up the word molestation, talking about evidence that would be coming in later, and they had filed a motion in limine, and it was ruled upon, and the judge had said, look, you can't use this word. And that's how it is. I mean, like emotions in limine can have, like, especially when you're talking about like 404B type stuff, where you're talking about prior bad acts, like those are the biggest things you worry about in cases, because that's where they're using, because there's such a fine line between what's character assassination and what's like a prior bad act, because you can't use 404B stuff like prior bad acts to assassinate somebody's character. That's not the purpose of it, So it's like they're super diligent about that in terms of objections, and if those things get violated, because it does have an impact on a jury. I mean, when you're sitting there with a jury, in theory, you have a jury who has no idea what the case is about, right? I mean, that's what you want. That you want like just completely fresh clay that you're molding through the course of the trial as either the state or the defense. You're trying to mold them, the jurors, in the way that you want them to be in terms of how they think, so if they come in and they're already preformed in terms of an opinion, it's a huge disadvantage. And that's why, all the shit that's going on with the Idaho 4 case and all this pretrial publicity is so fucking detrimental, man. It's like because look, like judges always say, like when I'm trying to pick a jury and they ask the question, have you heard of the case? Okay. And like, that's one of the first things that they'll ask on voir dire. And they'll say, Yeah, I've heard of it. Well, if you formed an opinion, and as a defense attorney, I'm sitting there and I'm hoping that they're going to be honest. I'm hoping that they're going to be honest. And then, the other problem is when you have cases that are huge, you're going to have court junkies that want to get on that fucking jury and that will lie and do whatever they can to sit on that jury. There's people that would love to serve on juries. I know we always talk about people who hate serving. Oh, I got jury notice to jury duty.
My mom loves it.
I mean, it's fascinating. It's like it doesn't even matter what type of case it is. Once you get like caught up in the minutia of a case, it's all fascinating. So, but I know that we're all human beings, and I know that there's no way that if somebody's formed an opinion going into that trial and they know the facts, that if the judge says, okay, well, despite the fact that you formed an opinion on it, will you be able to follow the law? And if that person says, yes, I can, the judge considers them to be completely rehabilitated as a juror. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm like, that person, there's no way I'm ever, like, I have to do 10 times more work to get that person just to zero, let alone to get them to the point where they're going to go not guilty. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's an inherently tough system for defense attorneys just because of the way it's built. And so when you have this kind of pretrial shit going on, where, especially in a case like the Idaho 4, where it's just massive publicity, it's a tough thing to overcome as a defense attorney for sure. It's brutal.
I was happy that you said that about, I'm like a parrot of you. I go everywhere and I say, Bob Motta told me this. And one of the things was that this all happens like before the trial in these motions. Yeah. And I'm like, why wouldn't, like, why? I'm more focused on that. I want to learn. I've learned a ton just in the last couple of months. And I feel like my biggest thing is learning all this stuff. And maybe if we focused on that, then maybe it wouldn't be so fucking crazy, because I'm tired of the argument about whether he's innocent or guilty. I don't want to have that argument anymore.
There's no point in having that fucking argument until we have trial. That's like, after we hear all the evidence, then we can all argue about whether he's innocent or guilty.
Sure. Yeah.
That's when we argue. Right now, we don't know shit. And like, Sleuthie, we're so early on. Like, we haven't even seen the good motions yet. That shit's all coming. All the motions to suppress, all the motions to quash, all that shit's still coming. Like, they're still bickering about fucking discovery. It's like, I'm sitting here as a seasoned attorney, like, this ain't shit. I mean, lawyers fucking bicker about this shit all the time. State never wants to give us shit. Like, they're not trying to help us, trying to fuck us. You know what I mean? They're not trying, like, it's always that fight. It's the struggle to try to get the evidence. And like the IGG stuff, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the judge is going to give it, because to me, the way it smells is like they're hiding something. You know what I mean? Because that's the way it looks on its face. The state is hiding something.
Bob, actually, when you made the point on Twitter, because we were all kind of talking about it, how maybe it makes sense or doesn't, you said, well, they can redact that sensitive information.
Exactly. Right. They're worried about giving out all the innocent people's information that that they found from the genealogical DNA stuff. They just redact their names. Yeah. Problem solved.
I think that
rocket science.
What it sounds like is that an argument could be made that, like, you knew you weren't gonna, like, you went into this under the impression that you weren't gonna have to turn this shit over and tell us how you got to him. And so you specifically used an FBI anonymous tip from the FBI that you knew that you weren't going to have to show us your work, basically, and did it on purpose. But it's really interesting because all of the FBI stuff they don't want to turn over, right? They're arguing about everything the FBI touched. They don't want to turn over the stuff about the pings. They don't want to turn over the stuff about the surveillance footage and who decided what it was and when it was, and write the reports, and which I still don't understand, because how'd they go to a grand jury with no report? But they're like,
they went with that fucking PCA. That's it. That's all. Like, you have to understand, a grand jury, it's unchecked aggression in terms of the states going in there like that. Like, that's why I was saying months and months, like 7 months ago, I did my TikTok. I'm like, there's no way this is going to a preliminary hearing. I know everyone wants to see it. But if anyone in Idaho, in terms of that prosecutor's office, has a brain in their head, they're going to a grand jury, because then they don't have to expose anything publicly in terms of what they're going to get the indictment, because they're going to walk in with their piece of paper. The shit, like, there's a saying, you can indict a ham sandwich.
Oh, I was just about to bring that up. I was like, isn't there a saying?
Like that saying exists for
Brett
a reason.
Brett Payne walked in and read the PCA to them like we do on YouTube, and was like, this should be enough, right? It was enough for the judge.
I mean, and it was. Like, I guarantee you, they didn't have, at that point, they may have had something else, but they wouldn't have needed it. It would have been enough to bind him over for trial, because binding them over and getting the indictment still isn't beyond a reasonable doubt. You know what I'm saying? It's still that probable cause level. So it's a much lower level that they have to meet in order to bind it over. Yeah, it's
basically hardly anything. If you really think about it, you could be arrested at any time for it. I mean, if you look suspicious, a document could be written up about how suspicious you are, and then you'd have to figure it out after that. But
I mean, if they were to dig into any of our lives, and I mean dig, we're all
suspicious looking shit all the time.
Man, like, I'm going down on some shit if they start digging in my shit. Like, there's no question. And I haven't done shit, but they'll be able to couch it in a way that it looks like that I have. It's like they take anything that you've ever said online, they'll take that and they'll take it out of context, and they'll use like one little portion of it. I mean, it's like, it's all manipulation of data and evidence in terms of, again, remember, I mean, when you're talking about a trial, you're talking about a state coming up with a theory, and it's nothing more than that, because the bottom line is they weren't there. They don't know. I don't give a shit how convincing they sound like they know what happened. No, you don't. You weren't there. You're guessing. You're guessing based on what the evidence is. You're guessing on what happened. And it's the same with the defense. Like, like either side is simply taking the evidence and trying to create the most compelling narrative in order to convince the jury either that the person did it or that the person didn't do it. And it's not supposed to be
same evidence, basically.
Same exact evidence. Same exact evidence. And like, like, I have never walked into a courtroom ready for trial and not thought that I did not have to prove my client innocent.
Yeah,
like, it's not supposed to be that way. It's not. The standard is, it's all the burdens on the state completely. They have to prove beyond a reason. I've never walked in the courtroom like, I don't have to do shit. These fucking assholes have to do it. Like, I've never felt like that. I've always felt I have to show this jury that my guy didn't do it. I have to.
I actually have a question, Bob, about that. So what if your client actually confesses to you? He tells you I did it. What's your duty then? Like, can you morally still defend him, or do you just try to get the lesser sentence?
I mean, that doesn't.
Even if they're not like actively in a crime, right? They're not actively committing a crime.
Well, so it depends. So, like, you got to give me more in your hypothetical. When does this happen? Does this happen in the middle of trial, or does this happen
before trial? Before trial.
So typically, and this never happens in real life, Dan. That's like for movies and TV. Like, my clients never like, I did it. I fucking did it, man. They're like, I didn't do the shit.
I feel like I can trust you, Bob. I did it. Just keep that between us.
I'm your lawyer. You have to tell me the truth. Did you do it?
Well, I've actually seen people ask.
You have to tell me you're a cop, right?
Well, I mean, everyone's been watching movies their whole fucking life, so that's how people think that, they've been watching Law and Order and SVU and all that different shit.
Does a lawyer assume that you're guilty, or do they assume you're telling them the truth?
So like, from the defense side,
I'm gonna get in the beer. I'll be right back.
Yeah, like, would you?
I don't even. It makes no bit of difference to me one way or another whether they committed the crime or they didn't, in terms of what my job is. Yeah. Now, if you're talking about a moral thing, does my morality take a hit? And that's one of the reasons I don't ask. Because I don't want.
That's what I wanted to bring up. So I've seen people ask, do defense lawyers ask their clients if they're guilty?
I never do.
I've always said, why would they? Because then morally they can't really defend the client. Like, what are they going to do at that point?
Well, they would.
To zealously represent them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If, like, I have a guy who's like, I just murdered 50 people. I'm like, oh my fucking God, this guy. Yeah. I got to figure out a way to get this guy convicted type shit. So it's like, you just don't ask. So, like, typically when a client walks into my office and they're like, hey, I need representation. I got arrested for this. I don't ask, did you do it? I ask, what are they saying that you did? Yeah. They being law enforcement. And then he'll say, this is what they're saying I did. And then I let it rest. And then when the discovery starts coming in, my client either comes into my office if they're out on bail, or I go to the jail and we sit down and we go through the discovery and I go through the evidence and I say, look, man, I'm gonna tell you flat out, we got a really tough case because they have a shit ton of evidence against you. So like, and I still, at that point, I don't need to ask. I just need to tell them what our chances of success are at trial. And if they have a shit ton of smoking gun evidence, the guy's fucked. I'm gonna say, look, like it doesn't matter how silver-tongued I am. Like, we're not going to win this. So I'm going to recommend to you that you allow me to go to the state and ask them for an offer, and then let me try to negotiate that and see what we can come up with. And, you know, but at the end of the day, that's their choice. They can still say, fuck off. I want to go to trial. Right. Despite, you know what I mean? That's one of the things that is completely in the purview of the defendant, is whether or not they want to go to trial. That's not my choice ever. So even if I know I'm going to go get hammered in court because they have everything that they need and more, I'm forced to do it, you know? So those are tougher cases than, like, it's just, typically I don't have clients come in and just like fall on the sword and make admissions and, oh, I did it. You know, it's like, it's rare. So it's like, it always comes to that point in time where I'm bringing the discovery to them, or they're coming to me and we're going through it. And I'm like, man, we're up against it here. You know, like, we got to be realistic about this. They've got a lot of strong evidence, and unless we have a way to rebut it, unless you're going to be able to tell me right now that information's incorrect, and I'll send my PI out and we'll do the work. You know what I mean? So it's like that, from those conversations and that work that we do on our end, that's where I figure out kind of where justice is going to lie. You know, and I mean, most of the times the cops do the job right. You know, I mean, most of the times they do, because it's like so few cases actually go to trial. I mean, the vast majority of everything pleads out. I mean, that's just the reality. You know, it's like we watch these trials on TV, but you have to realize that, like, when you're looking at a trial in a state for murder, there's probably only been 5-10 cases that year that have gone to trial for murder or less. Because most of the time the shit pleads out, because most of the time they have the evidence, and most of the time the state's going to make an offer where, if, like, Illinois is not a death penalty state, but if they have some movement on the offer, you know, I mean, I'm going to tell my guy, look, man, you should seriously think about this, because it's not going to get any better if we go to trial. They're gonna have a trial tax, and you're going to pay for it on that end. So, yeah.
All right, Bob. So real quick, taking it back to the touch DNA thing, have you ever had a client where touch DNA was a piece of evidence, or even the key piece of evidence?
Yeah. Anthony Garcia.
So what was your approach to defending that piece of the touch DNA?
Well, we hired an expert who was fucking brilliant. His name's Carl Reich.
He
happens to be an Illinois, like, scientist. He's a DNA guy that happened to be right in Oak Brook, Illinois. And, because after I found him, I saw Zellner used him on the Stephen Avery case, and then I saw him on 2 other cases. I'm like, oh, it's Carl. Like, the guy's brilliant, because what he can do is he can dumb down DNA so that normal lay people can understand it, which makes him brilliant.
I'm curious about the approach, though. Like, were you attacking the unreliability of touch DNA, or?
Well, so in our particular circumstance, it was touch DNA on a doorknob. All right. So the state's theory of the Garcia case was, remember, there's 2 sets of murders that took place, 2 double homicides, one in 2008. That case went cold. Another set of double homicides takes place on Mother's Day of 2013. They investigate that. They think that they're connected because there's a Creighton University connection, because the man in the couple that was killed on Mother's Day was the chair of the pathology department at Creighton at their medical school. And from the 2008 murders, an 11-year-old boy was killed, okay? And his father was the chair of that same department. So you have the director and the chair, and they had switched those positions a couple times over the years, but they were both higher ups at the point that Anthony Garcia was fired back in 2001. So 7 years went by before the first murder occurs. So he gets fired in 2001. You've got 2008. The first set of homicides happens, and it goes cold. They can't figure out who did it. because there's no motive. It's kind of like what's going on with Idaho 4. You know, they landed on Kohberger, but at the end of the day, there doesn't appear to be a motive. You know, so it's like that's one of the things that always kind of gets your mind. Like, motive does not have to be proven ever in any case. However, the jury wants to know what and why. You know, the jury will. Why would they do that? Like, well, I mean, we need, because remember, these are stories, and without the motive, it's a massive plot point that's missing out of the story. It's like, because we all want to know why. Why would they do that? You know,
well,
like,
and if you're telling me from minute one that it is a targeted attack on the people inside that house, well, then there has to be some obvious reason of why this person would be. It wouldn't be just some random person that just came out of nowhere. I don't know. I also wonder.
I agree. If it like, but like I've discounted coffin fuckers like complete like her targeted attack bullshit.
I've heard the best names recently.
Yeah, I mean, because like
you can work her name so well.
Yeah, dude. Like I reject her notion because she has no idea. She's sitting there just pontificating and just, you know, trying to just draw clicks. So whatever her motive is, I don't know what it is, but she's heard it from enough people that are actually in the law game that she should know better at this point. You know what I mean? It's like at some point when she hears it from enough credible people, when you've got Andrea Burkhart, you've got myself, you've got Aziri, like, and I know she's like, people hate her, but she speaks a lot of truth and she's a really smart woman. And, you know, but she rubs people the wrong way. Like I come in with a little more tact, you know, but like she's got it coming from people that are in that side of the criminal justice world who are actually in the courtrooms, telling her to take a breath, take a step back, you know, quit saying the shit you're saying because it's inaccurate. You know, it's one thing if she would come on and say, oh, well, this is my opinion, and that's all it is. I don't want anybody to take what I'm saying as fact. All I'm doing is throwing out my opinion. She started to do it a little, but then she always backtracks, and she'll put shit out there as if it's factual or theory. And it's like, I mean, it's like, what are you basing your theory on? Like, what are you basing that it was targeted? Because, like, they have no idea. Well, because the idiot cop in the beginning said it was a targeted attack.
Yeah. He's creepy looking. He's stalked them. He felt persecuted. That's why people stalk people. They feel persecuted and then they kill them because like it's this ultimate profile. And we just talked about this yesterday or maybe this morning. I don't know. But I was like, I think it's irresponsible to put out this idea that like someone who's capable of killing 4 people potentially that they never even met before has to be this creepy weirdo, like hiding in the shadows, ugly, uncomfortable person. And then you think, okay, well, as long as this person's really friendly and outgoing and talks well and charming, then they can't be a killer. And that's not true. So
Ted Bundy and John Gacy.
Well,
John Gacy was like Norm from Cheers. Like every bar, this guy went, John! Like everyone fucking loved Gacy. Like no one had any idea that guy was the monster that he was at all. Like, you know, I mean, that's no clue. None. You know, so it's like, yeah, that's absolutely not true. You don't have to be like some like mouth-breathing weirdo lurking in the weeds, you know, to be a fucking murderer, man. I mean, it's just like, frankly, it's the opposite of it. Like
it's usually the opposite. Like, they blend in well.
For sure.
Totally.
Yeah,
I mean,
dude.
like look at like American Psycho with Christian Bale.
Yeah.
Was a perfect example of what I consider to be like the ultimate sociopath. Like somebody like super good looking guy. Like you would never expect this guy's like a murdering psychopath, and it's exactly what he was. You know.
Yep.
You know, like so. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, I mean, as far as like the Kohberger goes, I mean, the guy's got so many like fangirls. It's bizarre,
dude.
You know, I mean,
the internet's full of people that love Kohberger, like women.
That's what I'm saying, and it's like they keep calling him an incel, but it seems like based on like the amount of women that say that he's attractive, I don't see how he would be an incel.
But I also think the problem is that people will say, like, if you say anything, like he's not like he doesn't look like someone that you would equate to like incapable of meeting a woman ever. I mean, that's
what I mean.
My opinion. I'm not saying I would date him, but I'm saying I know girls that would. Like,
right?
He's just a normal dude. He looks like everybody else in Pennsylvania. He looks like every other boy in the mountains of Pennsylvania. So it's like,
right. Exactly.
Not,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like he's not.
The dude ain't ugly. I mean.
Right. I mean,
we just know what he's.
Incel is like somebody who couldn't get laid in a morgue type dude. You know what I'm saying? And like, that is not what that guy appears to be to me. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. Maybe I'm misreading it, but you know, it's like it's one of those things that I'll never figure out.
That shit's weird.
Because everybody's like, he's an incel, and I'm like, first of all, I'm like, I had to fucking Google what incel was. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
Same.
Oh, it's the new word.
Scary. Yeah.
Oh shit.
Oh, and then the lady that said that he was a cannibal. Tell me you've seen that.
I ain't seen that one.
Oh,
I missed that one.
Shut up. She was on News Nation. She's that doctor. I'm sure someone will know. Is it Lieberman? She's an older lady with like blonde hair. Listen, she sat there and she said, you have to hear her say it because it's just way more bizarre to hear it come from her own mouth. But she said, I believe that he is a vegan because he's scared that if he eats meat, he'll engage in cannibalism.
Oh my God.
I swear to she is an expert witness at people's trials. Carol Lieberman. That is her name.
Carol Lieberman.
He doesn't eat meat because he's scared to be a cannibal.
How do they put people like that on? I don't get it.
Views?
I mean, he's
sensationalism.
I mean, there's incredible people like me, and I've been on News Nation a couple times, but like, I have to be honest, man. I like thought long and hard about whether I was willing to do it because I know who they put on that fucking that channel, man. Like, I'm like,
they get wild.
Like, if I ever got any kind of notion that I had a producer telling me that I had to say something that just was not something I'd be willing to say, like I'm walking. Like I'm never gonna say crazy, stupid shit just so they can get ratings, man. It's like it's reckless. It's reckless.
Man, I can't find that clip. I want to see that so bad.
Me too.
I saw a question come through, Stevie.
She sounds like a nice Jewish lady, so I imagine she had like Lieberman's definitely a Jewish name, and my wife's Jewish, so nobody out there get on.
Hold on. All right. Let's see a few questions here. Under review, 999 question here. Before everyone gets too drunk / tired / high, why go through the trouble to get the dad's DNA to match rather than bring Kohberger in for questioning and get his DNA that way? Love you all, by the way. Thank you, under review.
So who do you want to answer it? Sleuth, you start, and then I'll finish.
I mean, I don't know like the professional. I would have assumed that when they went and stole the trash, they were intending on getting Brian Kohberger's DNA. Now, they got it back within 24 hours. Then they, at that point, had surveillance on him. So I'm not really understanding how they couldn't just go get more trash. Or at that point, like you said, bring him in. I mean, if you really think that he is your person, but I don't know, because it gets really hairy if you read the DOJ things that the policy that they use. The problem is this is so new, and so there's really no like concrete answer. But there's a little blurb in there that says that you literally can't arrest somebody based off of not a one-to-one match with themselves. And I just find it hard to believe they couldn't find a cup somewhere to get his DNA. It just
seems... beyond that, like we know by like when was the date that they knew of the so I think it was November 28th, 29th, when they at least had pinpointed when the guy from Pullman, the security guy or whatever, the cop fucking calls and says, I think I found this car you're looking for, right? So like why weren't they just sitting on this dude's fucking house making sure that when he walks out and then just pulling DNA off his own doorknob when he like goes in somewhere? Like they had ways to be able to do it. And frankly, they did the same thing in the Garcia case where they arrested my guy in the same exact way that they got Kohberger. Like they never talked to him ever. Like they had, it was like, it mirrors that case in so many ways. It was mere presence. Like they had mere presence. Like my guy was in Omaha And for them, that was enough. A tunnel, like as soon as they got our guy in Omaha for reasons unknown, and they didn't call him and say, hey man, you know, we've got some concerns and we need to clear some things up. You know, that little statement we were talking about. Now, I, of course, would tell Garcia to shut the fuck up and not say a word. But, you know, they would have asked him, like, why were you in Omaha that day? And if he has a viable, but they never did that. They never attempted to do it. And it's the same in this case. So that never happened. So the reason that they end up pulling the garbage out was because at that point they didn't have Kohberger's DNA. So, and like Sleuthie said, I mean, obviously,
I don't have your lighter or anything. I don't know what you're asking me for. I have my headphones in.
So they don't know that you know, they at that point they knew Kohberger was home for the holidays, for the break, and you know, they thought that there was an ample chance that they would be getting his DNA, just as probable as getting his father's. You know what I'm saying? Like when they got the DNA off or whatever piece of garbage it was, it could have been his or it could have been his dad's. Either way, male line shares the you know the STR, I think it is.
Yeah, but people aren't going to like this. I think that people get scared about the strength of the case if you suggest that they weren't watching him for weeks before he left to go to Pennsylvania. But I think that the reason they did not go behind him and collect anything or swab the doorknob or take something out of the trash at the office after they watched him walk away was because he was not their suspect until after the FBI gave them his name on the 19th of December, and he was already gone. So maybe they did try to call, and he said, oh, I'm not even there anymore. I'm like in Pennsylvania. And they were like, okay, well, we're going to get a search warrant now then for his phone because that's suspicious, even though everyone else left too. But I think that's what happened. They didn't have the opportunity to take it surreptitiously. We know they took it off of somebody's cigarette, right?
Right.
We know that now. So they didn't try to do that for him. But I want to know how many other people they didn't call and ask about particular things or reach out for a DNA sample.
And until Ann Taylor gets all the discovery, and like, just so y'all understand how it works with discovery. So, and it's interesting because in this case, much like Garcia again, like I had, like there was the feds involved, there was Omaha PD involved, there was the LA County Sheriff's Department involved, there was Indiana State Police involved, there was multiple agencies, you know, and like with the Idaho 4 case, we don't know how much the feds were running that game, you know, and when the feds are running the game, they don't play nice. They're not sharing with local, they're like, Moscow police is not finding out shit from what the feds have found out until the feds are good and ready for them to let them know. And then they're going to decide if they're going to let them share in the credit, you know, because for law enforcement agencies, it's all about who's getting the credit because that's how they move up. That's how you become a lieutenant. That's how you become a captain. Like credible busts are how you move up in law enforcement. I mean, that's what they rely on. That's their currency is arrests and then convictions from those arrests. That's how you rise up through the ranks. So, you know, it's like you were saying, so we have no idea. Like the feds might have been all over somebody else. They might have been all over Kohberger and they're not telling Moscow anything. I mean, we don't know. But you know who will know is Ann Taylor. Because she'll get all the police reports. She'll get everything from the feds, everything that they did. And, you know, at least on its face, she'll get everything. Because as a defense attorney, I can't know that something's missing if I don't know it exists.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like if they had some shit that, like, you know, that's why like Brady violations are always so slippery. Because it's hard for me to go in and attack and say, well, you didn't give me this fucking exculpatory evidence because at that point, I don't know it exists. It almost always comes to my knowledge base after the fact, you know, where I'll find out after the fact that this existed, like, because they've hidden it, you know, and I have no way to know that it exists on the front end other than to speculate. You know, and they're not going to allow me to go on a fishing expedition in order to draw, you know, and make accusations of Brady violations because, you know, the judges are like, hey, that's a very serious accusation you're making against the state. You sure you want to do that? You know, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do it.
Dude, Bob, I bet you were fun as hell to watch in front of a judge, man.
I mean,
dude, right?
For sure, yeah.
It's a lot like this, except I don't swear.
I imagine. Well,
dude.
yeah. I mean, I imagined it just like this.
Yeah, I mean, like I was pretty good with juries. You know, I'm like
I would imagine, dude. I didn't even think about that aspect of it. You're so fucking personable. Like,
well, that was my whole
That's
game,
important.
dude,
You got to be pretty charismatic to be a lawyer, period, right?
man.
Or-
I'm sure there's some super dull lawyers, though.
I mean,
dude, watching Trials with Jay all the time, we see these terrible, like they have like no showmanship whatsoever. Like there's a little bit. You have to have a little bit extra something, dude. Like,
well, I mean, like you have to look at it like you're acting. Like, I mean, there's no other way to. If you're the state, you are acting so beside yourself at this person's guilt and how they committed these heinous acts, and you have to sell it. Like, you have to understand. Like, there is an element of acting in every single trial. So, you know, I mean, for the defense side, it's even more so. You know, I've got to act like I'm just stunned. Like, you know, I can't believe that they're saying this about my client. This is outrageous. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking? So it's like I'm super effusive, and the judges fucking hated me. But Alice and I are both like, we're both very effusive, animated lawyers. Like, we're not buttoned down. Like, neither of us, you know, I could fake and be as prim and proper as I need to be, but that's not my personality, you know, and I'm always trying to connect with the jury. You know, I want them, because look, if it's a close case in terms of the evidence, the jury's going to go with the lawyer that they like, because that means that's going to be the lawyer that they believe, you know, I mean,
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy, but like, and it goes back to that shit that I was saying, that nobody knows. Yeah. Like even in a trial, it's like we have this evidence and we're trying to piece together this crime.
Unless you've got video evidence of the crime happening, right?
Right.
That's like the only thing.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Exactly.
And that's scary. And it's just like with the experts, like you said, that he was really good at dumbing it down. Like that's really what it boils down to, is whoever can dumb it down to the point where it makes sense. And they're not, I don't want to say entertaining, because that's not what I mean, but their delivery is good and can hold their attention. That's the one they're going to go with. But it might not even be the right information. You know what I mean? You'll have two experts that are looking at two different things. And Dan, I've been sitting here in my head, like replaying your question to Bob about the touch DNA. And I'm like wondering, now I feel like I steered you away. Now I have to steer you back to answer his question. Do you fight the validity of it, or do you fight?
Yeah, you never answered that, Bob.
I got off track. Well, I was trying to give you guys like background. So at any rate, and of course I get like sidetracked.
Thank you, Sleuthie.
I'm the worst.
I'm the king of the segues. So I like it, at some point there was a third doctor that my client did battle with when he was back in school, and her name was Dr. Butra. So after they get my guy under arrest, they find out that the house alarm, her burglar alarm, went off on Mother's Day at around like 12:30. So they put it together in their minds after they had read through his entire file from Creighton, and they saw that there was this massive static between these two people. They're like, wow, let's go over there and like just on a lark, like take a swab off the doorknob, because that was the door that opened that triggered the alarm. So they come back, they pull the swab off, they send it to the lab, and they come back with a 1 in 12. So you just saw like a 1 in 5 octillion or whatever number they used for Kohberger. So our number was 1 in 12, that they can't exclude Anthony Garcia. So that means that
really
it's the same as one of the jurors also cannot be excluded. It's not a number that's good. It's a bunk number. It sucked. So we of course had our expert come in, Carl Reich. We got him all the raw data. He looks through it. He's like, no. He's like, this isn't even his DNA. There's 2 peaks. Like, and he starts explaining the peak alleles. And like, I mean, like I'm listening to him like, all right, we got this shit on lock. So then what the state did there is they go and find this company that had just started, that had created this algorithm, and they came back with like a 1 in 7 octillion type number on Garcia so we're like, no.
Oh, okay.
We're like, no, this is not tested science. We want a Daubert hearing on it. And if you guys don't know, a Daubert hearing is like anytime there's any kind of evidence that's trying to be put in, like scientific evidence, it has to be vetted by putting experts on to show that it's legitimate, not junk science. So this guy who had this company who created, he's like, I have the superior way to test DNA. It's like, it's infallible. However, he wouldn't give up his algorithm. He's like, that's proprietary. I'm not giving it to Carl Reich. He's going to steal my idea. So that way we were never able. So we were able to exclude their second DNA, like the profile that they created from this second company, because they refused to turn over the algorithms to allow my expert to test it, to make sure that it was valid. So what the judge then does, he says, okay, I'm going to exclude that DNA from that company. Okay, so you're stuck with the 1 in 12 shit. And I'm telling the judge, I said, well, my expert's going to come in and he's going to say that that's not even his DNA, and he's going to testify to it because Carl Reich's a genius and their state lab, like flunky, is a piece of shit. So like the jury's going to buy what my guy's saying because he's got the pedigree. So the judge says, okay, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you put your witness on to say that DNA was no good and it's not Anthony Garcia, I'm going to allow them in their other DNA, that other company that had the 1 in 7 octillion. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we can't even do a Daubert because he's not turning over the algorithm. So it was this giant fight. So we called that. So we ended up not being able to put in, because of that ruling of the judge, that wasn't our client's DNA. And in the context of their overall story, that was the key component. That was, he went to that house first, to Boutra's house. He tried to open the door. The alarm went off. He got scared off, and then he went and audibled and killed and found the Brumbecks and went and killed them instead of her. Like, if you take that piece out, their entire story crumbles. Wow. So when so basically they were able to come in and say 1 in 12 without my expert being able to say, well, that's junk. That's nothing.
Crazy.
That's one of you in this jury, your DNA could not be excluded as to what they found on that doorknob. You know what I mean? So we were precluded. Yeah. We called it the nuclear option. We're like, do we just let Carl Reich testify and we say fuck it, and we let that other shit come in?
The seventh, yeah.
Dude, it was a nightmare. Like, we literally, that was our nickname for it, the nuclear option. So it was brutal.
You gave a good example, and I think without even realizing you were doing it. So the octillion, okay, that there's a declaration of Becca Barlow. She's the DNA expert that helped them with their objection, okay? And she has like a footnote on it that says that she called it prosecutor's fallacy, and she said him saying that it was a 5.37 octillion chance that it was Brian Kohberger's DNA versus anybody else in the world's DNA is not a ratio. So how you just said it, where that's like in the scientific community, they'd say that they were able to determine that they were such and such percent of a contributor or whatever. That's one of the ways. Or saying that, like you gave the ratio about not able to exclude them out of, let's say, 12 people. Those are reasonable numbers. What they're doing in that motion to get the protective order,
right.
They're basically saying, we tested Brian Kohberger's DNA and we're comparing it to what's the probability of it being Brian Kohberger's DNA. But that's not what we're looking. We need to know what's the probability that this is anybody else's DNA too. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I wonder if they're going to change it.
The thing about that DNA is, like, whatever, like, first of all, there's not an octillion number of people on the fucking planet. So, like, why they would ever say
why did they say that fucking huge number
of human beings that exist on the planet makes no fucking sense to me.
No, it's weird. It makes no sense.
We're just gonna make up a number. We're gonna make a number that I'm not even sure actually exists, and we're gonna say it's
planets that we haven't discovered yet.
It's like
they're including the universe,
including Pluto that we got rid of.
Yeah.
It's a gazillion bajillion. That's how much it is. Yeah, so I mean,
better.
Yeah, no, it's crazy in terms of that kind of shit. And like, the other thing that we don't know is we don't even know the strength of the sample that they pulled off that sheath. It could be a partial profile.
Yes.
Like single source is different than being a full or a partial profile. We don't know any of that shit yet. And believe me, Ann Taylor's DNA expert,
be right back.
like once they get the shit, they're going to be digging into all of it, you know? So like we're going to get our answer, but it's not going to be until trial, because this thing, there's not going to be any Alford pleas. They're not going to, like, this thing's going to trial. Like that case, I feel, is 100% going to trial. I don't think there's any way that he's pleading out on it. Like I can tell by the fight that they're putting up, like this early on, just by that procedural posture, that thing is going to trial. When you've got a case where, like, say for instance, Richard Allen, like now we've just heard with the Delphi case, he made these 5 or 6 confessions, right? That's like devastating. Like there's nothing that you dread more than getting a phone call from like your client's wife saying, so my husband just confessed to me like 5 times during this jailhouse phone call he made to me. And you're like, what? So I'm like jumping in my car, like driving over to the prison, like, what the fuck? You know, so it's like, that's going to be, you know, I mean, obviously they're going to try to attack those statements by saying that his mental state was completely.
And you saw him in person, right? You saw exactly how.
Yeah, man. I mean, and he's like vacant, but I don't know if that's because they're tranquilizing him before he comes into the courtroom, which they did to my guy in Omaha.
What did they give him?
Like tranquilizer. Like my guy slept through his entire trial.
I saw that picture,
yeah. I mean, he looked like the Unabomber. He's like this.
Yeah, he did, dude.
He could not stay awake. I mean, I watched
dude,
it too.
Well, I found out after I started. Dude, it was crazy.
That's fucking crazy.
I found out after we started the Gacy season, a nurse from the Douglas County Jail messaged us, DM'd me, and said, hey, I wanted to let you know that I was the nurse in the jail that was administering the tranquilizer to Anthony Garcia every time before court. And I was like, I mean, that's clearly unconstitutional. You cannot, you cannot drive, because Anthony Garcia wasn't crazy guy going nuts in the court where they're having to drive. Like, he just sat there and never said anything. If anything,
so like, what's the fucking reasoning? Like, why do they want this guy?
Well, because they wanted him to look like
he has no remorse and stuff.
Wow, they wanted him to look like he didn't give a shit. That's so fucked up. Wow,
it's fucked up, man. It's fucked, dude. It was some dirty pool. Like, I'll tell you that right now. I will just tell you that right now. So, hey, man, I saw somebody drunk Texas turkey or some shit. You put it up there. Yeah, not in Chicago. I mean, they definitely take sergeant exams. It's predicated on politics and what you do out on the streets and your busts. I mean, yes, they take tests, but at the end of the day, you know, promotions, at least in Chicago, but Chicago's a very political city, so it might be different.
Dude, that's anywhere in this fucking country, though. Every state's a little different with stuff.
Totally. Yeah. But like where we're at, Chicago, it's all politics, man. Like everything's politics. Like as soon as Kozenzak, who was the lieutenant at the time for Gacy, within 3 months of the Gacy arrest taking place, he was the chief of police. So, and he didn't take a test to get that. So, like, you know, I mean, it's different everywhere, you know, but like lower level cops, you take the sergeant's exam, that's different. But to think that busts and arrests don't count as like credit in terms of you moving up in the ranks, that's definitely a thing.
Performance-based promotions. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. You know, the more that you do and the better that you do, the higher up you go, the more integrity you have. I feel like that makes sense to me. I mean, I think they should have to take a test too. But
totally, I think they should have to take tests for everything. Yeah, I think they should have like massive like psych exams, like whatever they do for psych exams. Like no cop should ever be hired as a police and go to the academy unless they've had like massive psychological testing, because it's like way too much power with that gun and that badge to put somebody that's uneven in there. You know, I mean, we see it all the time. It's like these cops that aren't equipped to handle shit that they're probably not, like, they shouldn't be dealing with mental illness and addiction, but it's like, that's the reality of our society. And frankly, that's primarily who's committing crimes, are the mentally ill and the addicts. You know, I mean, like they're driven to it by different forces, you know, and a lot of times it's driven either by like the mental illness is just affecting their ability to be able to rationally think, or they're driven by the addiction and they need the fucking money to get their fix. I mean, it's like those are the realities of crime. I mean, that's like the real shit that I see way more than murders. You know, I mean, that's the stuff that comes in our door every day. you know, and it's like, and cops shouldn't be having to deal with that. They're out there trying to enforce the law. They're not social workers. That shouldn't be their task. They're not trained to know how to deal with like somebody that's going through an episode of like psychosis.
Which is different, which is totally different than you would treat a criminal, you know?
Totally different. Like, I had a friend in law school who, like, after our first year, she disclosed to us that this was actually her second time doing her first year because she had psychosis, and she decided to quit taking her meds. And she was a paranoid schizophrenic, man. So she like literally thought that people were trying to kill her. Like literally. Like, and to the point where she's at a restaurant across the street from the law school at a pizzeria, and she pulls like the butter knife on like the waiter. Cause she like in her mind, this guy was like, so it's like, and the law school was cool about it. I mean, she was diagnosed. She's like, yeah, you know, I just thought I was better. And like the medication drags me down. It changes the way I think and feel. And like, I don't like it. So, but you know, then they let her come back, you know, and as long as so, I mean, that shit's like real. Like, and like, it's so like just ignored. It's getting better in the criminal justice system with like dealing with mental illness, but it's such a prevalent thing that the state just refuses to accept that it exists, which is so annoying to me, you know, because like I'm always trying to go to people, like if I'm trying to plead somebody out because they've got strong evidence, I'm like, look, kid's 19, he fucked up, he sold a bag of blow, big deal. Like let's I'm not saying you let him go, but you know, like give him a shit ton of community service hours, make him feel it, but let's not hang a felony on him and ruin his life.
Fuck him forever.
Other than that, he's a good shit. You know, I mean, it's like, but those conversations just fall on deaf ears because typically I'm dealing with kids that just got out of law school because they gobble them up in the prosecutor's office. You know, they just gobble up these new
they have something to prove, so they go all the way, you know.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, to learn how to become a trial attorney, there's no better place than the public defender's office or the prosecutor's office. I mean, you're going to go to trial a lot. You know, if you want to learn trial advocacy and how to become a good like trial lawyer, there's no better training ground than the prosecutor or the public defender's office. You're going to get more work than you can ever handle. So I know why they do it, but then I'm dealing with 25-year-old kids who don't have any life experience, that don't understand that life is a roller coaster. There's ups and downs for all of us. Life is fucking brutal. Just is for all of us. We all have shit days. It's like, you know how it is. You can have the greatest thing happen to you, and then the very next day you get punched right in the fucking face.
That's actually how it always happens.
Yeah.
Every fucking time.
That's life. But like we're always even Steven pretty much. You're never going to be too high up because there's always going to be something to bring you right back down. So you just have to try to kind of float in the middle and avoid being completely miserable all the time because life is brutal, you know? I mean,
there it is.
Sorry if that's a little pessimistic, but it's true.
That's what being an adult is.
Bob keeps it real.
So I keep telling my 11-year-old, I'm like, dude, you do not want to be a grown up. And I'm like,
he's got it good right now.
Yeah.
He's got it good right now.
Dude, yeah, she's living the dream, that one. She's got me wrapped around her middle finger or little finger. I'm like, yeah, it's like whatever she wants. She just plays me like a
hey, to the
at least you know it.
Bob, to the drunk turkey
one.
I want you to see this one. Chief isn't a testable position in most places. Every place I know of, usually the chief is appointed by the mayor and city council, and the chief selects his brass, but that's political, not off arrests.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But but that particular case, it was definitely political because they had arrested Gacy. So yeah, I mean, like Chicago PD, they have tests for everything. But like I'm going to tell you, for instance, so like the guy that I'm doing Gacy Part 2 with is an old Chicago homicide detective who was chased out of Chicago because he had like whistleblown against a fellow officer named Ronaldo Guevara. You guys should Google him. He's the guy that was using all of his confidential informants to close murder cases. So he ended up putting 51 innocent men in prison using his CIs to finger innocent men to close these murder cases that were cold. 31 of them have already been exonerated, and Chicago's paying $20 million a pop on these things. So Bill Dorsch is the one who was the whistleblower. So for instance, his sons have taken all the exams. in the last, so they chased it. He lives in Bulgaria right now. Like they literally chased him out of the city, like the cops did, like with like veiled threats. So he lives in Bulgaria, and both of his sons have been Chicago cops for the last 20 years, and neither of them have ever gotten the promotion, despite the fact that they've taken the test and they've scored as high as you can possibly score on all the, whether it be the sergeant test, the lieutenant test, like any of the higher ranking officer tests. They just won't move them. You know, I mean, there's always that element of politics to think that there's not. I'm just going to go ahead and completely disagree with you.
I wonder how they picked, like how Brett Payne got this promotion to be the lead on this particular case with 4. I mean, do you have like any, because he was young, or because they found a knife sheath and he had military experience? Like, I don't know where they.
I mean, we're not talking about cream of the crop out there, though. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe in terms of like, I mean, like, it's not like they had like a plethora of amazing detectives to choose from, right? I mean, it's like, they're like, well, I mean, Payne seems as good as anybody else, and he's got some military. I mean, who knows? You know, like, who knows? Like, because like you're imagining, like if I'm him, I'm kind of like wanting it to be lead on it, and I'm also not wanting it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because that thing can go either way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. It's a tough position to be in, because look at all the shit that they were taking like pre-arrest. Like the whole country had them as a bunch of fucking nincompoops. You know what I mean? Like bumbling fools, like they're over their skis, which they may or may not be. I mean, that is yet to be seen. You know, like clearly, like it's that thing where you're kind of like looking at something, and like anytime that you start to dig in and parse, like the way that we're parsing this case, like how Sleuthie parses shit, like she gobbles up every fucking word from every document that comes out. So she's going to find every wart. You know what I mean? And what I'm saying is that there is not going to exist on the face of the planet in the history of jurisprudence a case that doesn't have warts, a police investigation that doesn't have warts. We're humans. We fuck up all the time, you know? So it's really just a matter of, you know, trying to mitigate how much you fucked up and hope that you got enough right to that you did the job, you know, from all angles, whether it's the prosecution, whether it's the cops, whether it's defense. I mean, we're all human. We're all going to make errors. And like when you're being parsed like that, when you're just being scrutinized, like every single thing, every word you've typed, like is going to go past like 5 million eyes. Somebody's going to fucking find shit that you fucked up. It's just, it's facts, you know? It's like as hard as and as much research as I do for my pod, there's always going to be somebody like Turkey in Tennessee or whatever it was. Well, that's not how they get jobs. You know, I mean, there's always that guy. There's always that guy that knows. You know, like as much as I do, there's always going to be people that know better, you know, or that are looking. So, and when you have that many eyes on it, it's going to be a thing where you're going to find the warts, because they always exist. There just is no such thing as a perfect investigation. It's impossible.
Yeah. And I guess that I accept that. Like I get, so, and I've said this before, like my uncle retired, he was a Philadelphia police officer, which is much different than being like a police officer in Moscow, Idaho. So
it
like,
is.
I get it. And he's the first one that will tell you, like, I say this all the time, like there's good people, there's bad people, cops are people. They're not like on this high pedestal. You shouldn't put them there, because we're all humans and we're not infallible, right?
Totally.
So we're always going to fuck up. But understanding that certain things that you might find when you're parsing through it doesn't mean the whole thing is destroyed. It just means I want to know, and I'm looking, and I'm taking each thing that's fucked up for what it is, and then the good shit for what it is, and then weighing it one side or the other. Because for me, like whether I have any involvement in terms of the decision whether Brian Kohberger is guilty or innocent is irrelevant, because there's going to be another Brian Kohberger and another Brian Kohberger, and whatever standard is set is going to end up being the standard. Does that make sense? Right. Totally. So like my expectations for putting someone in a chair and 6 people shooting them in the heart is high, and I don't see why there's there would be anything wrong with that, you know?
That's exactly how it should be. I mean, like they were trying to put my client to death in Omaha, and I went in there fucking guns blazing, and I told them, I'm like, this is scorched earth. This isn't my jurisdiction, first of all. I don't have to practice in front of these judges. I don't have to be friendly with these prosecutors. You're trying to kill my client. You're going to fucking prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, period. Yeah. And I don't give a shit. You know, I'm not there to make friends, man. Like, and that's the way it should be. Yeah. Like, it's exactly what you said. If you're going to put somebody to death, you better be goddamn sure that it's the right person, period. Yeah. Dude, like, you know, I love what you do. Like, I've asked you DM wise, I'm like, yo, I need you to be my fucking researcher on my I want to like gobble you up, and like, I mean, I'm
trying to get you to like pull me away. I'm like, hey, I'm done, world, YouTube, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to talk about the Idaho case anymore. I've like been pulling up things I could find, but like Bob's got all the actual facts that I can't find on the internet. So I'm like, anytime you want to send me an email, like
I'm turning that shit over to you. We'll keep it a secret for the peoples, though. But I want you on that. Like, I want you on that. Like
my brain needs it. My brain.
Yeah,
needs
I know. I could tell you were getting weary.
This week was a bad week. Yeah, this is a bad week.
No, you know what? I mean, people are coming after you hard.
I'm walking into Wawa, and I'm like, what the fuck are you looking at? Like,
dude, an escape from Idaho for a minute would probably be good. I mean,
for sure.
Fucking Twitter and
YouTube,
we all
need, like mental health breaks from 100%. Shit that we're like,
it gets to be a bit much. It really does.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's like I struggle with like my desire to learn, and I feel like this is a great case to learn step by step what happens in a court case. So I'm like fighting my desire to want to learn about how that whole process works, and not wanting to argue with stupid people anymore. Yeah, I'm over that. Like, I'm so over. I feel like I repeat myself over and over and over and over and over again.
You have to, because you've like, at some point you have to decide, like, and that's what I did with my Twitter. I just like, when people were giving me static about like what they put in a PCA and what they don't, and I'm like, okay, you know, like I don't want to be that asshole who's like, okay, well, I've been practicing law for 20 years. What the fuck do you do before I engage in the conversation with you? Because I'm not going to argue with somebody who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Teaching opportunity, right?
Right. Yeah. But like, so like, you know, but like, people don't want to hear shit.
That's true. They don't want to learn. They don't want to learn
anything.
You can keep saying it. Yeah.
Once people land on their fucking, like, whatever they think is right, it's impossible to win a Facebook or a Twitter war. You can't do it. No matter what my credentials are. And, like, Sleuthie is, like, gets sucked into those things with these people, and you just have to be like, fuck off, dude. Like, I'm like, and it's hard. It's like, because I was doing the exact same shit. Like, I'd get sucked in by a troll, and then I'd be, like, battling. I'd be like, oh my God, you know, like with my typos just over, and I like having to retape the same sentence 7 times because I can't fucking write a sentence without a type, you know, and it's like, shit just gets old. And like, I mean, you're working 2 jobs. Like, you have a full-time gig, and your shit that you've been doing on this case has been full-time since jump. You know what I mean? You're now like 8-9 months into your like, you're working 2 full-time jobs, which I don't know when you sleep, to be honest with you.
I do this stuff like when I'm supposed to be sleeping. Like, I sleep because I'm a mom too. Like, and I'm a single mother, and I do my job, my 40 hours a week.
I know.
With doctors that are babies too. But then
I saw some asshole fucking come at you on your mothering the other day. I about lost my shit on that person. I was like, you know what? Like, you handled it like a champ. I'm gonna just say that. But man, that was like, see, to me, that's like, I don't know.
Because like, you disagree with me. So because you disagree with me, I'm a bad mother, and somebody should call CPS. Like, my son's
that's the fucking internet today.
Yeah, like my son's on the beach right now. We've been here for a week and a half. Like, what do you do? Like, where are your children? You should be worrying about that. And like, I know. I mean, like, I know. So I'm more comfortable in that because I know what kind of mother I am. But it's difficult for me to wind down. My brain is, and I've always been that way. And it's difficult for my brain to stop. So typically I'll lay in bed, like when we're all done here, which is eating up a good portion of when I would be like laying in bed, because my son's been in bed for 3 hours now. So
nice job, guys. You blew it. You're eating into Sleuthie's sleeping time.
Well, no. It's eating into the amount of time where I'd be laying here, like pulling up, you know, research papers. Like, this is when I do like all my stuff is I like read a bunch of shit. I'm like in my iPad with my pen. So I generally function on about 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna tell you this flat out. You know, like you're a lawyer at heart. Like that's I think that's the thing that I tell people. I'm like if I'm at trial, like you can never turn your brain off. Like I can't think of any other profession except maybe like a scientist who's like on the verge of like cracking some mystery of the world. You know, that like they're just constantly. Right. But like when I'm in a case and like if I'm on a 6-week trial, I don't fucking think about anything else from the moment my eyes open to the moment my eyes close. It's that, you know, and I'm like, and so like that's exactly, you're living the life of what like a trial attorney lives, and there's nothing else like it. I mean, you really probably should have gone to law school, even though it's a miserable profession.
I love everything about it. Like, and I love talking to you guys about it. I love when like Andrea Burkhart is so good at not just giving me the answer, but giving me like links to stuff. Like this is the answer.
She's my favorite lawyer to follow, besides Bob.
I love her. I love the both of them. And I love Sarah too. Her delivery is a little bit harsh, but like I get it. And so I like when you don't just tell me based on your experience what the answer is. I want you to give me other examples of other people's opinions, kind of back up your opinion. She'll pull out multiple, but my point is once I realized that like law is not the law, like I always thought the law was the law, but the more that I see and watch, like it's always fucking changing. A judge can make a different decision like tomorrow, and then how they handled a piece of evidence 10 years ago is not the same as they're doing it tomorrow. It's for the birds for me. I like a set of like the 10 commandments. I know what they are and I know what applies, and like you know what I mean. And I with the Constitution, I don't know how you guys keep it in your head. Like
you can't. Like that's literally why they force us to do continuing legal education, because it's like going into law school. That like that's but imagine if it was like the 10 commandments and we couldn't have changed things. Imagine, think about all the fucking horrible shit that we've done to people of color in this country.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if we didn't have the ability to change the law and to adapt it to the current times. I mean, like when you hear like a Supreme Court justice and if you hear the term that they're like a strict constructionalist, that means that like Scalia before he died was a strict constructionalist. Like a lot of the guys and gals on the Supreme Court that are on the conservative side are strict constructionists, which means that they view the Constitution through the eyes of the framer. So they don't like whatever. So meaning that they
when they wrote it.
Yes, when it was written. Oh, okay. So that they're discounting the fact that the world has changed massively since the time that document was written, and they're always looking because. And as brilliant as that document is, and that's my Bible, the Constitution is my religion. It just always has been since the minute I walked into law school. I'm like, this is an amazing document, and it's amazing because it allows for that. It allows for the change. It allows for us to adapt. It allows us to change bad law. Because remember, the laws aren't written by lawyers. They're written by the people that we elect, our legislators. So like when people are just picking names and they're going in, you know, on election day, oh, well, this guy, or just picking parties and not looking into what that person thinks or feels or believes in terms of when those laws are getting drafted, they're House bills. So the House bills are drafted and that's like a proposed law, and then it has to go through the Senate. And then if it passes all the way through, then it's made into law. And so when a law starts to change is when the first guy, say it's a criminal statute, the first guy that gets arrested on it and convicted on it, the first defense attorney that looks at it and says, man, I don't think this statute is constitutional, so I'm going to fight this. So that's when the appellate process takes place. All law changes through the appellate process all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. So that's how law changes, through the appellate process and above. You know, I mean, none of it changes, and none of the law. That's not to say that like most of these people that we elect as legislators are attorneys, or like a good majority of them. So I mean, they have some basis in the law, but in terms of when it's going to change, it always changes based on convictions and then an appeal that takes place where that law is going to be scrutinized, and you want the appellate court to look at it and say, okay, well, this violates due process. You know, it's like what they're trying to do with like, you know, travel bans for the abortion things. Like those things are going to get struck down. These states are going to make these archaic, barbaric laws, and they're going to get struck down as they go up into the higher levels of the court as unconstitutional, because they're trying to criminalize people for traveling. You know what I mean? But like, but that kind of shit's going to go on. Like when Roe versus Wade got like overturned, I'm like, that's going to be what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to criminalize people crossing state lines to have the procedure done, which is exactly what's happened. Like they found ways to work around it, you know, and we'll see if those laws stand up. I mean, we can only hope that they don't, you know, because like the government, the government has no business telling anybody what to do with their body.
100%.
Under any circumstances. And that's, I'm sorry if you feel differently out there. And I'm not saying that I'm pro-abortion, but I'm pro-human. And the government has no fucking business telling us what to do with our bodies ever. That's the way I feel about it.
We actually were gathering, like we were gathering resources, and like there were people that were, when all of that happened, people were putting out themselves as like helpers, you know, like I'll be willing to help you get where you need to go, find care that you need, stuff like that. And it felt so like Handmaid's Tale-ish. Like it felt so old and like, but my question is with everything you just said, my issue with it is what then happens to the people whose fates were decided based off of old laws or trial rules, or that was eventually changed? Like, what about the people that have already?
It's a great question. So like, so say for instance, when they legalized marijuana in Illinois, like
we're all
legal. Like, so everybody that was in on a misdemeanor, if they were in custody, they were released, you know, their records were expunged, you know, like, and so if anything that fell under the statute that was no longer illegal, like everybody that was in was then exonerated of those charges. You know, if it's like, because there's still aspects in terms of you can't have X amount of weight. So that's still illegal because, of course, the state wants to make their tax money. They don't want to have to compete with the black market weed sales. So they want to put them out of business. So, of course, they keep that statute in there, when the reality is that no one should ever be in prison for selling weed. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, that is not what prison is for. Prison is for violent offenders. That's what prison's for, not for people trying to sell a dime bag of weed, man. I mean, like, no, like that was like what went on with that, with the war on drugs that started during, you know, like Nixon really kind of started, and then fucking Reagan perfected it. But, you know, like that was a war against people of color. That was a way to get people of color into fucking prison and off the fucking streets. You know, it was just an extension of slavery, really. But like I'm not going to get into that kind of shit, but I've got long thoughts. I mean, I grew up in a very liberal area, so like that's just the way I am.
Bob, when that law passes and they get exonerated, is that immediate? Is that day of, or is there a process?
Yeah, like because it was, and like when it was coming to be, like that was a question as a lawyer I had. I'm like, am I going to start getting a million calls for expungements?
Yeah.
Or are they going to are they just going to do it as a matter of course? And they didn't, like, we didn't have to file expungements. If you had a weed bust in your record, it was cleared. If you were in jail or in prison on it, you were cleared. So that was it.
And what about not laws per se? Like, what about the way that a trial is handled? So the easiest example that I can come up with is, let's talk about like a search and a seizure. Okay. Let's say that 20 years ago, you were convicted for growing pot in your backyard, and they used Supreme Court decisions, obviously, to determine that you argued, well, that was in his backyard and nobody should have been in the backyard because the whole thing was fenced in, and they had no business like peeking over the top of the fence. And the ruling was that it was a perfectly legitimate search. If it was outside where it could be seen from the air, then it was like fair game for somebody, a police officer, to have noticed and arrested you. Okay. Let's say that's the ruling 20 years ago. Now, 20 years later, they're like, you can't do that. Like, the Supreme Court decided that you can't do that. You have to have a search warrant if you're going to go into something that's fenced in, and this is not a real thing. I'm just making this up.
Right.
What's going to happen to the person who was arrested because they jumped the fence to find his pot 20 years ago?
So I mean, yeah, no, I see exactly what you're saying. So like, in terms of like the ability of law enforcement to infringe on our civil liberties, which is what you're talking about with like the Fourth Amendment, it's different. Like that changes. Like, that's why I try to tell people, I'm like, the only thing that matters about a presidential election is how many Supreme Court seats are going to open up, because conservative judges lean towards more police involvement in our lives. They give them a wider berth. They allow them to do more things in terms of police engagement, in terms of searching and seizures. They create a bigger reach for them. Whereas, you know, like the liberal courts typically have shrunk it. You know, they're like, okay, you know what I mean? So that fluctuates. Like our civil liberties over the years have gone up and down. So it doesn't apply in the same way that like a statute where you have something like that's black and white. Like if you're in possession of drugs, like, and if it's if it's marijuana, it's a crime. That's a different thing, because you're talking about a constitutional violation of our rights, and it's not like a crime per se. So like, that's not going to result in them overturning it, because at the time that was good law. It's like, it's not to say that a lawyer might not try to go into court and say, okay, well, look, you know, like this ruling that you made that screwed my client 15 years ago, well, the law has completely changed in terms of that search that they did then now would be considered an illegal search. So if that happened now, that evidence would have been suppressed, and my client wouldn't have gone to prison. You know, they're like, you're not going to get it overturned now. Like they just won't do it like it's to that. Yeah, it's
so really it's just about the judge's decision, like in that moment, just what they decide to do, kind of thing. That's what I don't understand. Like, I don't know how you all ever get a handle on it ever, because it's like, it's never the same.
You never will. I mean, and that's kind of like it's the ugliness of it and the beauty of it all, though. Like it's like the Constitution really is like a living, breathing document, and it's like, because everything's born out of that. Like all of our laws are born out of it. Like everything with relating to like what we're talking about here tonight is your Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights. Like it's all those particular constitutional rights that are within those three amendments is like what we're dealing with in the criminal justice system, and they're always going to change. That's what I'm saying. It's like, if you give a shit about like our civil liberties and our rights in this country, in terms of how much we want law enforcement to be able, like some people are of the mindset, I want law enforcement to be able to, like, I don't commit crimes and I want criminals off the street. So, you know, like I don't have a problem if they pull me over with a lower threshold of probable cause. Like, cause now what they're doing with cops is like, they've decided that a cop can walk up to a car and say that I smell marijuana, and then that's enough probable cause to search the vehicle. Like, which is bull. Like, how are you gonna fucking disprove that?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, oh well, like there's no half a joint in my car. You know, it's like it's like a free pass. It's a free pass for them to get into your vehicle without a warrant by just merely saying the words, I smell smoked marijuana, I smell burnt marijuana. Then they're in. And it's almost impossible from the defense side to disprove it. You know what I'm saying? Well, they'll say, okay, well, why didn't they find the other half of the joint? Where's the rest of the blunt? You know, like where is it? Like what did this smoke just come out of thin air? Like, you know what I mean? It's like a super tough argument, because the judge is going to assume that they flicked it out the window. It's like, so like that kind of shit is like, you know, but that'll get litigated over the years, and like we'll try, like the defense bar will try to knock that thing out, and we'll try to get it back to where it's reasonable. But you know, and it's like it falls along political lines. And you know, I saw Jay say, like, if I started kind of like shit with the abortion thing, sorry, I didn't even mean to bring it up, but like it's a good example with the state line thing, you know, in terms of like
crazy.
That's a crazy law to have, no matter which way you side on the abortion thing. So like that, in terms of saying where you can and can't go.
Right.
Right. You can't cross state lines.
Real quick,
Yeah,
before
that's crazy.
sorry, before it disappears, I just want to. Drunk Turkey Show had a question for Bob. Stevie,
Okay.
do you see it up there?
Yeah, hold on. Boom.
I just didn't want it to disappear.
Even though this dude don't like me, I'd like to know what can the defense do with the tree info? Can it affect the DNA profile created before the tree was and the match from BK to it?
So first of all, Drunk Turkey, I love you. I do not like you at all. Like I debate for a living, dude. So please don't take
Bob
me
gets
as,
wild, man. He's
yeah, dude. Don't take me as.
I was trying to tell him that you're
like you.
just having fun, man.
Yeah, dude. No, I've been paid to argue for 20 years, so it's in my DNA. Throw the
Pop
question
it back up. Pop it back
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed the first part. I was trying to listen. Thought it was just me.
I'd like to know what the defense can do with the tree info. Can it affect the DNA profile? I mean, maybe because so my wife is my law partner, and we were talking about that in terms of, because we were saying, look, like I was devil advocating with her because she's a defense attorney too, and I'm like, well, like what can we prove with like what is our argument that's giving us in terms of that? And I think, to me, the strongest argument is that I'm attacking that they didn't have probable cause from the get because they used that tree information to get the arrest warrant. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going all the way back trying to quash the arrest warrant by saying that they used this genealogical DNA, the IgG stuff, in order to get the arrest warrant, and that's invalid. And like the first battle they have to fight is to get the shit from the state. Like, but that's the argument I'm making to the judge. I'm like I have to have everything that they had in order to be able to understand how they reached the conclusion that this was the guy in order to get it. Because they walked in front of a judge, and I assure you that them saying that was his father's DNA, in the garbage, which is going to be a match to his, was the cinch to get them the arrest warrant on that guy. So when I'm going all the way back around trying to attack that warrant, that's why I need the tree stuff. I need to know where they came up with it, and on top of the fact that they found 3 other male DNA sources in and around the house, with the glove and samples in the house. I mean, there's shit everywhere, and there had to have been more. Like, we know that there were like frat kids galore up in that house that morning up until noon. Like, they were in there, and like, I'm completely speculating, but I think they were clearing that fucking house of every fucking drug that was in there because it was a party house. There's going to be weed. There's probably going to be Molly. There's probably going to be all the shit that the kids take. And they're like, dude, we can't have anybody going down on this shit, namely Dylan and Bethany, because there's a bunch of shit in the house. Like, we need to clean this house before the cops come in here and tear it apart because there's 4 people that have been killed. You know what I mean? Like, what is the other explanation for why they were there for hours? What the fuck were they doing? I mean, like honestly, like what were these kids doing before they decide to call at noon the following day? Like we know, when my TikTok, I had DMs coming, like, just flowing in. You never know who you can believe. You never know, like, 'cause you can only vet people so much. But they're like, oh yeah, like, my daughter's the best friends with Dylan, and I'm like, this is what we know. So like I'm not running with that shit on my TikTok, but I'm like, all right, it makes sense. Like, it makes sense that the kids were there, like, because I had heard that the kids from the boys from the frat had been in the house, that they were they were, who knows what they're doing. What I do know is that they were fucking up the crime scene. That's what I know. They were like, anything that they would have had that was pristine was then fucked up by a bunch of frat guys being in there for hours, doing God knows what, moving shit all over the place. I mean, who knows what they were doing, but it creates an issue, which Ann Taylor is going to absolutely destroy them on.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier.
Turkey, I don't know if that answered your question, but I mean, that's the way I would go. Like, and try to use the tree to like attack it from the front end. I mean, you're always going back to try to attack the arrest warrant. Like, you're trying to say, you try to quash that because that stops it, brings it back, it moves everything back. Everything that happened afterwards, if you quash the arrest warrant, all the shit that happened subsequent is gone, because you've quashed the arrest. You're saying that they didn't have probable cause, or they got it, because like at some point I'm imagining there's going to be what's called a Franks hearing, which is going to be, and Taylor's going to give them notice, and we're going to do a Franks hearing, which is saying that they got a warrant based on either lies, flat out lies by law enforcement, or that they knowingly put forth bad information in order to get the warrant. So like that Frank's hearing, I'm anticipating that we'll have one in this, but we'll see.
I think the very careful wording of the PCA and the leaving out of the dates of when things occurred and stuff like that, I think is going to play into her argument when she says, I think this was purposely misleading. But aside from that, when I'm thinking about the IGG, couldn't an argument be, because you have to remember they don't want to turn over the tree itself, right? But they also don't want to say the name of the lab, and they don't want to show any of the chain of custody forms of the profile that went there and the profile that was created. They don't want to show any of that stuff. So couldn't like an argument be, I don't even know how accurate that SMP profile was that they even used to build a tree, number one. Right. And number two, did they get his name via tree and then build their case around the fact that they were given a name?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what Ann Taylor is arguing, and like in her response, yeah. Exactly what she said. She's like, you're assuming that the defendant is just going to say, okay, well, we're going to trust you that you did your job right and that this is real. Like, no, we need to see it all. Yeah, I mean, she's obviously going to attack that, and they have to be able to see all of that. Like, I don't see any way that the judge is ever going to allow the state to not have to tender that over. You know,
it's weird not to. It feels weird.
Too instrumental in the early stages of the case. You know what I'm saying? They're relying on the fact that, like, oh well, look, we're not even using the IGG shit because we have Kohberger's DNA now,
right?
And we have this match. So who gives a shit about that? But who gives a shit is Ann Taylor, because she's gonna want to attack on the front end the shit that took place early on in the case, in terms of them getting the arrest warrant, in terms of them getting the search warrants, all those things which were predicated upon that PCA. Like that PCA was their Willy Wonka golden ticket to getting all the shit that they needed.
She's going for crime scene costuming too, for sure.
Yeah.
I was just telling him. I don't even remember what the fuck I was gonna say. So it's
did you get to go over the IGG stuff that you wanted to though, Dan?
I have no idea. I don't even like. We've been over so much.
I had this pulled up that you wanted to talk about. You
didn't tell them how that guy's DNA got under the other guy's nails.
Oh yeah,
that's true. Like everything went off rails a long time ago.
We did,
but Dan,
you have to, because it's so bizarre. Like, not.
Do you remember right off, Sleuthie? I haven't got there actually in the story.
Yeah. Well, you could just skip.
I'm trying to read through here.
It was I can tell you what exactly, like not exactly, but yeah, it was a paramedic. So
so
he had been treated. He was drunk earlier in the night and got treated by a paramedic, and somehow that paramedic had contact. Sleuthie may remember better, but had contact with the victim in the murder, and that's how the DNA was transferred.
Yeah, like the paramedic treated the accused guy, and then transferred his DNA to when they were first responders to the scene where this person was deceased, and they transferred his DNA over to this. Yeah.
Wow.
Under the nails?
Yeah. How did it get under the nails?
Under the nails.
Well, right. if they were, you might look at the article because it does explain. I don't want to make
that's
up a reason.
Wild as shit, though. Well, that's even crazier. That if there's an explanation about how it got under the nails, that's wild as fuck. Because you would think that'd be the last place it would be able to get, like, under the nails. That's crazy.
I mean, I'm trying to think, like, it depends on what kind of nail. Like, my nails, like, it wouldn't be
good point.
hard to,
that's true.
You know, so, yeah.
They're
long. Dan, I mean, I have daggers, so I only have to barely scrape you, you know.
I had this up here from the state's motion for protective order. The state's latest.
I honestly think they covered all that stuff.
I had a list of notes here, and I was just looking through them.
They went hard
everything basically totally got covered just by talking. No, dude, you're the best.
It's all good.
You're the best. Good. Jay, before we came on here, was like, have a good show. Jay was like, have a good show. I'm like, it's going to be easy. Bob's coming on, dude. Bob fucking rolls, baby.
Crazy.
Like, Allison sitting next to me when, like, Jay, Shannon, and Allison and I did, like, a double date, and, like, Allison's like, let fucking Jay talk. I'm like, oh, sorry. I'm like, you literally have to shut me down.
I love it, man.
Me too.
I love it.
You make it super easy for us.
That's
I'll
what
go
Jay,
on and on.
that's
and
what Jay
on
was
and
saying.
on
I was
and
like,
on.
nah, man, this is gonna be good. This is gonna be
And honestly,
every time it's been so good.
and dude, this I've been telling chat like this show was about getting you two together because I knew you two would fucking have a lot to talk about. And
Yeah.
Stevie knew. Stevie's
Oh yeah,
100%,
this
dude.
is going
Like,
forever.
I wanted to have a unique Idaho 4 show because we're just in this recycled bullshit over and over and over. And yeah. Dude, I think this was fucking awesome.
And Sleuthie's like my most trusted resource. Like if I need anything about that case, I mean, there's only one human being.
Bro, she has a Google Doc that has fucking everything in it.
She's got fucking everything. Like everything. She's
crazy.
she's like, oh, have I sent you my timeline yet? I'm like, no. I'm like, please send it. And I'm like, oh my god, it's amazing. Like, it's like all the like she. I'm like she. I think it was the day when I was in Delphi and you hit me up like, have you read like the new shit? I'm like, what do you mean there's new shit? She's like. Because that was the Delphi hearing in my kid's 11th birthday. So I was like, she's like, oh my God. She's like, all right, wait, hold on. I'm going to put together an email for you. So I get the email from her. She like literally is outlined like everything that every substantive motion had in it. So I didn't even have to really read the motion. I'm like, man, she's a guy.
That's awesome.
She's amazing.
I was thinking of like all of us when we're like, I know I read it. I can quote it, but I can't remember which filing it was because they're all like named the same thing. So I thought like Bob hadn't seen it. He didn't have a whole lot of time. We're talking hundreds of pages that have been put out by that point. I'm like, I'm like bolding the stuff that's important. I'm like, hopefully he's like looking at this first.
Dude, it must be so time